Welcome to Togainu Nochi, Lost Blood. So I've wanted to play this game in forever, and now that I've finally jumped on board of the it's on Steam and I really should have noticed sooner train, I have to say I also bought the DLC thing from the Just USA official website. I'll link it down below if you want to buy it as well, because like I think the Steam version is like censored and like there's content missing. Well, censored is good for YouTube, yeah, but I don't want any content to miss. And also I remember this game, like I've seen media of it because I was a huge Dramatic Murder fan back in the day. But I couldn't get Togainu Nochi because it wasn't available to buy anywhere, and it wasn't even available to like download or something like that. I remember going through Air and Fantasy and stuff, if anyone remembers that. Anyway, we can buy it now, and it's time to play. I know it's a little bit tough of a game. I know there's a lot of fighting and blood, but I mean it's in the title, honestly. So let's just go. The nation is the focal point of collective identity. So long as they are safe within the symbolic placenta, alright, the people have no need to doubt. Behold the wages of hubris. Okay. The Third Division, mankind's third world war, 20XX AD. As it rode the wave of economic expansion that accompanied its shifting national zeitgeist, the small island nation of Japan started down the path of remilitarization. So many big words. A totalitarian national ideology, control of the citizenry that all but began in the womb, education geared toward producing loyal soldiers, a system optimized for war. Or so the people believed. But the nightmare of war far exceeded their predictions, and the terrible scars left in this aftermath made recovery a distant hope indeed. After the war, the survivors, desperate for hope, took the drastic measure of splitting Japan in two, East and West. Under the direction of their respective leaders, each side began to rebuild. These efforts focused at first on the rural areas, which had sustained relatively little damage, before proceeding towards the cities, which had suffered by far the worst. Makes sense. I mean, attacking like, it's like what happened in Germany with Kiel and stuff. This period was marked by a number of dramatic policy changes, all geared toward cutting ties with the past and establishing a new national ideology. Most iconic among these was the rechristening of the former capital. Dubbed the Old Lands, yikes, this blasted city was consigned to the oblivion of memory. Wow. Wow. Old Lands, seriously? Everyone believed that this would clear the way for a better future. 5 years passed. Considering the theme of this game, I don't think it's a better future at all, is it? Alas, the cracks from which all had averted their eyes grew wider in the interim, soon threatening to swallow the nation whole. The sudden shift in ideology had left the citizens bewildered, and the abandonment of the former capital had transformed the old lands into a hotbed of crime. The rot was too widespread for the government to contain, and the country was still divided into East and West. One of the two sides would eventually govern all of Japan, but unable to guess at the burdens involved, both hesitated to move forward. Okay. Additionally, each side held a different vision of how the nation should be reborn. Reunification talks fell apart again and again, and so the future hung on the brink. So if reunification is not, sustainable at the minute, why not keep it divided for a bit longer? Because obviously there's still a lot of restoration to be done, so why should you rush the reunification if it's not actually good, right? Am I being ignorant about this? Is it that bad to divide a country like this? It really shouldn't be, right? The brief glimpse of light at the end of the tunnel had begun to recede into darkness. I mean, countries are also divided. Oh my god. Okay. Let live or die. Just step on it, you know? Okay. Okay. Edgy. So I think the main character is Akira, and this is Shiki. Fan art. I don't know anyone else. Yeah, I have no idea who these people are, but Akira and Shiki, those two. Okay, so our little Aoba guy, or like Akira. The difficult past. Who's Shiki? I really do wonder. This image! Oh my god, it was bloody everywhere. I don't know any other image, just this one. Right. So is it like a drug? Kind of? Like the blood things? Is it about drugs? Ooh. Okay. Now that I mentioned not Danganronpa. Dramatic Amara, I'm really scared that there's going to be like really horrible endings. Because I think both games are from Nitro plus Chiral, so maybe both have like similar horrible endings. And if I remember correctly, Dramatic Amara had horrible endings. Even the good ones weren't that good. So I don't know. I'm kind of apprehensive about that. Anyway, death. On a lighter note. He thought it beautiful. He remembered body bags, human shapes swathed with babes in their gentle embrace. He remembered lowering their zippers to reveal the unmoving objects within. Objects as in the dead bodies. That was how the soldiers had always looked when they returned to the shelter. He thought them beautiful. To him, they seemed to be asleep. What was death, anyway? A horrible stench of decomposition. That's death. The cessation of function. The heart stops, the lungs stop, the brain stops, the body falls into an endless sleep. Was that not what it meant to be? Was that not what it meant to die? But was that all? Was there nothing more? He himself was in no hurry to die. But nor did he have any particular attachment to life. Even if he abruptly died in his sleep, that would be just fine. He tried to imagine himself fighting desperately to survive. What would be the purpose of that? What could he hope to accomplish by staying alive? What was the difference between life and death aside from the cessation of one's bodily functions? He pondered these things constantly. Even while watching the first tear through flesh... even while watching his fist tear through flesh, very different inflection, to shatter the hard bone beneath. Very edgy game indeed. Okay. Okay. Oh, so Akira's inner monologue? A destiny written in blood. Meet our hero. Thanks for the achievement. A pleasant numbness spread from Akira's knuckles to his brain like bubbles in a carbonated drink. The man's knees buckled and he sank slowly to the ground. I hope he deserved that. That was horrible. The unnatural silence, like a silent movie playing in slow motion, broke the instant he collapsed. All at once there rose a storm of noise and more noise. Not in this game. Rough voices clashed in disharmony, stinging Akira's ears. The man had been huge, both taller and heavier than Akira. He had looked down at Akira with eyes that pitied the ant he was about to crush beneath his heel. Ooh. But that hadn't lasted for long. The match had ended almost as soon as it began. Now the bitter howls of those who'd lost their bets mixed with the cries of those thrilled by the victory. Nice. Tough shit. Okay, some approached with repellent smiles, asking for comments like television reporters. Countless fists smacked him on the shoulders as if to laud the return of an old war body. Naked light bulbs swayed in the dimness, conspiring with the shadows to make the spectators stand out oddly. Wow. The crowd was gathered in one corner of a filthy backlot. All were young, though they ran the gamut from those who had never seen blood before to those who had seen too much. They were all here for one reason, to witness a competition of strength. Wow. Maybe war really does push us back into the ancient times. Shaking the blood from his fists, Akira pushed his way through the onlookers and headed for the cool depths of the alley, as if to flee their clinging eyes. He did not even spare a glance for the man he had just defeated. So why would you enter a competition like this if you don't want to be seen? Like, did he get money out of it? What? The air he inhaled was chilly. He pulled his jacket a little tighter around his neck. As the noise of the crowd receded, Akira felt like he was stepping into a different world. About 3 blocks away was the spot where Blaster... I just saw BL immediately. Where Blaster participants gathered to rest from the fighting. Someone had scrawled restroom in red mark on the wall. So this is their rib. Several youths were already there, smoking or drinking cheap booze as they chatted among themselves. Most were participants in tonight's contest, but there were also among them the retired fighters who had come to boast about past glory. To an outsider, they would look like a gang of delinquents. Which was, more or less, precisely what they were. Okay. Akira walked past the others lounging on the roadside, then sat down in his usual spot by the back wall. As he enjoyed the feeling of the cool asphalt through his jeans, he felt a sigh escape his lips. That last opponent, he was nothing. Akira hadn't even broken a sweat. This is how it had been for a while now. No one had been able to so much as bloody his lip. Damn! Which was why the more fired up his audience got, the more empty he felt inside. Oh, he was there for the prize money, nothing more. Okay, that answers my question. Letting out another sigh, Akira leaned his head against the wall and cast his eyes up at the sky. Tonight, there was a lovely full moon. Well, okay, I wouldn't really call that lovely. Eerie, more like, but okay. After World War III started, it had been years before people could look at the sky. During the war, and in the immediate aftermath, most of the population had lived in colossal underground shelters. There, children were separated from their parents and raised to the perfect soldiers. Ooh, they were taught to kill, to die. Glory to those who slay our enemies, your life belongs to your country. So kind of like kamikaze soldiers? Am I using that term correctly? That's sad, kind of like disposable fodder, I guess. Yet the war ended before those children ever saw battle, and the next thing they knew, the very same nation that had called on them to kill and die was asking them to forge a bright, loving future. Oh, yikes! The reveal was all too reckless and all too sudden. It began with the forced establishment of new family units. Normally, one might think that the children would have been returned to the parents from whom they'd been taken, but this was not the case. What? Parents and children who had never met were assigned to one another at random and forced to live beneath one roof as a family. What? Why? Of course, there was no way that these families could function. Abuse, neglect, and violence ran rampant. Well, obviously, what the heck? What? How does that make sense? The children had been taught nothing except how to fight. How were they supposed to feel? What was love, anyway? They had no one to teach them the answer. Their parents were hardly up to the task. What? Why? I mean, yeah, I know everyone is traumatized in this situation, but if the war really was as quick. The war was quick, right? Because the children didn't even grow up and stuff. So it was only a couple of years. So the parents should have known what love was, right? Like, they should have grown up normally before the war. Sure, they're all fucked up now because of the war, obviously. But, like, theoretically, wouldn't they just take their children back, the ones that belong to them, and be like, okay, so now... don't worry, everything is over. Let me read you Cinderella to fall asleep to. Isn't this like... wait, this is really weird. I don't really understand. Anyway, in their confusion, the children turned to battle. They had been taught that defeating one's enemy was the greatest possible glory, but the war had ended before any of them could put their training to use. These children needed a place to test their strength, which is obvious and should be endorsed by the government through, safe outlets. How did it feel to fight for one's life? What could you see at the edge of death? As if pursuing the answers to those questions, the lost children clashed with one another on the streets. Soon, these became known as blaster fights. The governments of Japan deliberately turned a blind eye. Wow, great, thanks. Although they passed new laws to make it plain that deaths would not be tolerated. Well, at least something. And so Blaster thrived. It began on the CFC side and quickly spread to Nikuren as well. What is CFC? Nikuren. I don't know this. I'm not familiar with Japanese topography. Is it topography? I don't know. Rules took shape and soon both groups and individual fights were being held. Japan's youths were starved for battle, and Akira was one of them. Oh, so he's one of the children. So it has been a while since that war thing. At the sound of approaching footsteps, Akira lowered his gaze from the moon. Two lanky silhouettes stopped in front of him. It was Virus and Trip. Sorry, I'll stop making references. Akira! Hi. The man with the yellow mohawk, which Akira thought made him look like a rooster. Yeah, grinned and raised his hand. Yeah. Ooey. Hello. You should eat more. The other one, a sickly-looking guy with long black hair, peered down at Akira with a smirk. Each of them was holding a bottle of booze. Akira had few acquaintances, but these were two of them. They'd been hanging around him ever since he started coming here. He'd ignore them at first, but they kept coming, and before he knew it, talking to them had become a regular thing. Oh, the woes of popularity! Yeah, sure am. Ace, the one with the mohawk, approached with his distinctive one-leg dragging gait. Okay, then plopped down beside Akira. Is it coincidence that his name is Ace and his hair is purple? Dee, the long-haired one, stood in front of them. Oh no, it's not his... Okay, it's Dee. Okay, well, would have been nice. Stood in front of them with a wide grin on his face. After giving Dee the finger, Ace triumphantly thrust his bottle at Akira. It looked like beer with a red label. Beer? Akira had no interest in booze. He shook his head briskly, causing Ace to purse his lips. I mean, Akira still has to fight. It wouldn't be good to, you know. Is it rare because it's good or rare because it's bad? You know, I would taste it. I really would. But then again, I wouldn't want to be in debt to someone I barely know. You knew and still got this beer? Walking back to look up, Ace waved his hand dismissively. Okay. You could have gotten me flowers instead, you know. Ignoring Ace, Dee raised his bottle high. More than it was before? Ace leaned forward, eyes bulging as he lashed out at Dee. Ace shot a glare at the smirking Dee, then cleared his throat a bit. What's lost? Ace hoisted his bottle overhead, clinked it against Dee's, and downed the beer in one gulp. Oh Jesus. Lost was Akira's alias? And Blaster. No one remembered who'd come up with the name. Somewhere along the way, it had simply become the norm. Akira didn't mind. Names meant little to him. Would have been even better if you actually enjoyed it instead of Xing it. What the heck? Dee shrugged his shoulders and took tiny sips as Ace laughed heartily, breath reeking of alcohol. Attractive? So if Akira is this infamous or famous, how come there's still so many people who are like salty and betting against him? Like, isn't that dumb? In this sector, Area Ray, Akira lost was known to all as the undefeated champion of the individual bouts. Right? So is it like first-timers that bet against him? Once upon a time, he had looked forward to these fights, but the enthusiasm of those early battles had vanished long ago, and now not even embers remained. These days, he approached every fight with the same sense of a foregone conclusion. Oy. He was there to earn a living, that's all, and because there was nothing else he wanted to do. But, by the way, does this work? Like, I mean, like, the prize money, isn't it kind of like, is prize money not, you know, kind of like crowdsourced by everyone betting? Where else would the prize money come from, right? So why would anyone still want to bet other than newcomers on anyone if it's just a foregone conclusion, as Akira said? That doesn't make sense. Usually fights like these are rigged, right? As far as I know. He wasn't even all that interested in the prize money as long as he had enough to meet his meager expenses. Akira had no dreams, no goals. He stayed alive only because he felt neither the need nor the inclination to die. That's healthy. Good hobby.
なんだっけかな、ほら、なんか結構有名なでっかいとこ。
近藤グループ？
あ、そうそれ。せっかくのお誘いをよ。
For like group fighting? Ace smacked the palm of his hand with his fist and jabbed an index finger at Dee. From time to time, corporations scouted blaster fighters who had earned recognition on the circuit. By and large, they were connected to the underworld, yakuza, or private security, but in this day and age, having someone to pay your way was worth a lot. Most fighters jumped at the chance. Why not go into private security then? If you're good enough, you might even get an offer from the world of pro sports. Oh, fun! Unsurprisingly, Akira had no interest in any of them. Do you have interest in anything, Akira? You'd need more than one hand's worth of fingers to count the invitation he'd refused up until now. Why? It's not like you have anything better to do. You just told us that you had nothing going for you. So why not try something new? The Honda Group recruiter had looked as if he'd been trying to advertise his Yakuza ties. Akira recalled his gaudy nouveau riche dress, but not his face or what he'd said. Well, Akira was only here because he didn't mind fighting. He'd never given any thought to his future. Maybe you should do that. If he ever ran out of prize money, he supposed that he could always find work as a day laborer. He saw no need to think any farther ahead. How is someone who's so, you know, non-intrusive, but like someone who thinks so deeply about things, right? Someone who's so reflective. Reflective is the word I'm looking for. So someone who's so reflective, who's always like, oh my gosh, what is death and what does it feel like? And it's so beautiful and stuff. Someone who clearly overthinks, right? How is someone like that not even sparing a single thought to what he could do to improve his situation, right? This is so sad. It's kind of like, you know, the teenager thing of like losing school or direction and being like, okay, what do I do on my own, right? So, but why is it just years now? I mean, I'm sympathetic to it if it's like in the beginning, right? But you should at least try something. Even if it's a hobby, just try something. Especially if you say you don't really mind and you don't care because you're so edgy. Just do something. Ace and Dee, who would automatically keep the conversation going whether or not Akira had anything to say, were actually rather well built despite their gangly looks. What? One of them looks like he could blow over with a soft wind. The nails were black with dirt and grime, and their knuckles bore the telltale scars of a street fighter. Was the money really worth the sweat and blood they'd shed? Either way, there was no shortage of blaster participants looking to get rich or just let off some steam.
俺たちで組んで優勝狙っちゃおうか。最強サンバカギ兄弟とかってチーム名にしてさ。
I like your self-awareness.
ネタチームかよ。
Dee's bottle was almost empty even though he'd been taking little sips, and he waved it as he joked around. Ace laughed briskly. They were nearly full-on drunkenness.
最強つえばさ、ペスカコシカみてえになってみてえよな、いっぺん。
What's that? Ace waved tears of laughter from the corners of his eyes as he murmured dreamily, Pesi? Akira wasn't familiar with the name. It must have shown on his face.
え嘘
As soon as they noticed Akira's confusion, the two friends' eyes went wide.
アキラまさかペスカコシカ知らねえの
Pesikoshka.
キでも知ってるぜ多分
ありえねえ超ありえねえブラスターのチャンピオンがさすがだぜ仙人みて
Akira scowled, feeling like an idiot, even though he knew he was being made fun of. As if it pleased him to have one up on the champion, Ace put on a gleeful smirk and wagged his index finger from side to
親
side.
切な俺様がボスに説明してやるや
Bullshit. I'm chief?
ペ
Okay.
スカコシカってのはな通称コート率いるちょっと前に一世を風靡したエリアゴースト出身のチームや
Okay, so many new words. So Pesikoshka was a team by some company. Area goes, I assume, is a company. And Code was the leader of said company or of said group. Or maybe both.
そらもう今のアキラみたく連戦連勝負け知らずでさ向かうところ敵なしそう最強チーム
What happened? Vanished? Imploded? Ace balled his hands into trembling fists as though recalling the excitement he'd felt back then. Come to think of it, Akira had a feeling he'd heard the name before, but he couldn't recall where.
まあ凶悪の凶を取って最強とも呼ばれてたけどな
Dee's interjection wiped the grin off
悪
Ace's
名高い
face.
ことでも有名だったからなめちゃくちゃひでえこととか平気でやってたもんな
Yikes.
ねそういう凶悪なことをいっぺんやってみたいとは
Dee grinned maliciously, crossing his arms.
誰もんなこと言ってねえだろそんぐらい強くなってみてっつってんだよこのタコ
Ace howled, waving his hands theatrically. Oh. Ace slammed his fist down against the top of Dee.
警察と勇敢に戦った俺の武勇伝を聞かなかったのかお前はお前こそなその薄気味悪いロン毛とっとと切りやがれってんだ
Heroic battle with the cops? Patting his injured right knee, which he claimed often had been wounded in righteous battle against the forces of tyranny, Ace reached out and seized hold of Dee's hair.
だってバイクでひったくりやったとこ見つかって追っかけられて事故っただけじゃねえかよどこら辺をどうすれば武勇に
Stop!
なる
Don't
ん
tell
だ
them
よ
my secret! Dee wailed, pulled forward by his hair. Leaning against the wall, Akira watched their antics with the detached eye. Ooh, okay, interesting image. He didn't mind being around these guys. They did whatever they wanted, regardless of how he responded. It was much more relaxing than being with people who were always gauging his reaction. He didn't care to have others tell him where he belonged. If they thought he was going to play their game of superficial friendship, okay, alright, then they were doomed to be disappointed. Sorry. Music. The music was just there. Oh gosh, Sasuke. He never said so out loud, but apparently it showed in his demeanor. People picking baseless fights with him had become just another part of his day-to-day life.
おいアキラなんとか言ってやれよこいつにさ一番バカなのはエースだよな
You only think this way because you never heard me speak my thoughts aloud. His parted hair captured on both sides, Dee shot Akira a desperate look. Akira didn't mind hanging out with these guys, but of course everything had its limits. Sighing, Akira reluctantly opened his mouth.
安心しろよ。似た者同士だから。
Excuse me? That was probably the first thing Akira had said since coming to this sector. As if they'd planned it, both of them looked at Akira at the same time with the same expression. They even mirrored each other in how their shoulders slumped, crestfallen. This drew laughter from the scattered onlookers who'd wandered in during the show. Looking up at the sky, Akira returned to his thoughts. Even if the moon vanished one day, things would be just fine. Okay, he's really edgy. I really, really hope that he's getting character development because, like, Jesus Christ. So much edge. So much edge. Gosh. Even without its lights to guide them, those who crawled the earth would find some way to get by. In this place, there was rest from the strain of living. That was why Akira kept finding himself here. Soon, Ace and Dee recovered, and the sound of their banter once again filled the comforting silence. Darkness. Oh gosh. We're in prison. Only an hour or two after falling asleep, the thunderous bang of the door crashing in tore him from his precious rest. Footsteps pounded hard enough to make the bed springs creak, dragging Akira up out of slumber. Huh? In his half-asleep state, he couldn't process what was happening. This was Akira's apartment, a tiny room in a rundown building, empty but for a bed, a refrigerator, and a small lamp. The floor and walls were bleak concrete. There is a shelf there. It's empty, but there is a shelf. To Akira, who needed little more than a place to eat, sleep, and shelter from the rain, it was the perfect room, comfortable and empty of meaning. What? This... Dude, you're living a boring life. Get a hobby. Who had shattered his peace in quiet? Probably someone he'd beaten, looking for revenge. It wouldn't be the first time. Oh, nice. Too lethargic to rise, he remained sprawled in bed, even as he sensed some coming up beside him. Okay. A split second later, someone seized the front of his hair and yanked his head off the pillow. Jesus, what the frick? Why is he just sleeping? Two men in black uniforms, they weren't from Blaster. The one gripping Akira by the hair looked high-strung with slicked back hair and a thin face. The one standing behind him was well-built. Both were wearing white gloves and had clubs strapped to their waists. Oh, shoot. Cops. Nice. Seeing Akira's glare, the thin-faced officer let out a snort of laughter. No good morning. Without letting go of Akira's hair, the man punched him hard in the face. Jesus, rude. He had no idea. I was sleeping! Murder? He looked at the well-built officer. Wall-built. Though the post-war chaos had at last begun to calm down, the system was still full of holes. False arrests were hardly unusual. Nice. The thin-faced officer's temples twitched. Let go. Oh, sorry. He tried to shake free, but the man only gripped tighter. Honestly, like, when this happens, if he says, like, false arrests are common, how the heck are you gonna be like... Will you stop talking? So, like, if it's common for false arrests to happen, like, what? Isn't it smarter to just run away and be a fugitive then? That is so horrible. It really is very dystopian, but also, like, he was sleeping. He has no alibi. Narrow eyebrows rising, the thin-faced policeman contorted his lips in a sneer. Why is he talking so slowly? But like, this is even more of a reason. If you're notorious, isn't it even more of a reason to get like the protection of some huge organization behind you? Because this is like foreseeable, right? Of course something like this would happen. They knew his alias, it meant they also knew his reputation on the streets. He doubted they had a positive image of Blaster. Knowing he was the champion, they probably thought he was some kind of psycho. Would make sense. He's kinda cute when he speaks. Orejanai. Akira snapped, his voice low. He snapped by saying, I didn't do it. That's him snapping. His voice low, the thin-faced officer grabbed him hard by the jaw and jerked their faces together. His eyes were full of contempt. Oh wow, this is getting gay already. Alright. With that, he released Akira's hair and stepped away. Immediately, the well-built police officer seized both of Akira's arms, then dragged him out of bed and pinned his hands behind him. Well, honestly, like, in the universe of this game, Akira has done everything wrong. But at this moment, the worst thing he can do is follow them, right? Like, is that the wrong conclusion? I would probably run away if I was him. Honestly, I would have done very, very many things differently from him. But, like, also, please run. Ooh. Rude. As Akira attempted to shake him off, the thin-faced officer clubbed him in the back. It was a merciless blow, knocking breath from his lungs. Oy. Grinning, the thin-faced officer leaned forward and tapped Akira on the side of the face with the end of his club. The officer behind him hauled him to his feet, then marched him through the front door. Even more than the false accusation, it was their attitude that infuriated him. They probably hadn't performed a real investigation. He didn't normally give a damn how this country was run, but that didn't mean he was about to let these cops walk all over him. Yeah. Is it the childhood friend? As soon as Akira was through the door, he heard a familiar voice. Turning, he saw a friendly face, eyes and mouth agape. Yeah, it's him! It was Keisuke! Frozen in place, with his hand stretched toward the doorknob. His coveralls were so stained with black that it was hard to make out the original color. Excuse me, sir, this is my boyfriend. The thin-faced policeman shoved him aside with his club. Right? I think he's an option. Coming back to himself as he staggered, Keisuke laid a frantic hand on the shoulder of the officer restraining Akira. The officer flung him back with so much force, Keisuke staggered again. For a second he looked shocked, but then his anger flared. Excuse me? Ooh! Keisuke dove at them, but the well-built officer shouldered him away. Keisuke? The power of the blow was too much. Keisuke collapsed with a groan. Wow. Thanks for nothing, Keisuke. This could have been awful for you. Akira looked over his shoulder as they dragged him along. Keisuke was watching him, face screwed up in pain. Oh no. Even after the officers forced him to face forward again, Akira could sense Keisuke's eyes staring helplessly at his back. Well, why not just come with me to the police station then? You know, give a report or something. Why lunge at them? What? Okay, whatever. Thanks for trying, Keisuke. The cheap-rusted steel desk rattled beneath the detective's hands. In the light of the desk lamp, his face looked like a well-carven totem pole. His scowl was so fierce that his eyes seemed about to pop out of their sockets. He had been repeating the same phrases in his aging bellow for quite some time now. Akira leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. He wondered if the man would ever get bored. Okay, this is not the time to be edgy, Akira. It just makes you look worse. The timid-looking detective taking notes nearby made a tentative effort to calm the older man down. His gaunt features and pale complexions made him look like a walking corpse. Nice! Yes, please! Oh my god. The detective asked Akira in a somewhat more restrained tone of voice, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a wrinkled handkerchief. Akira didn't reply, of course. From the beginning, he hadn't responded to any of their questions. I want something iced, bitch. Ultimately, he was here as a material witness, since they hadn't pinned him down definitively as the perpetrator. But that didn't change the fact that the interview was meant to extract a confession, and there was no way he was going to confess to something he hadn't done. The inspector's face flushed red, contorting more and more as the silence continues. Just, you know, try to be polite at least, Akira. Like, everyone's just trying to do their job. Give them, like, something else plausible to latch onto. Try and do their job for them, people like that. Eventually he began quivering, all but letting out a snarl before losing his patience for the upteenth time. Like I said, coffee, please.
警部、それをよこせ。
Yikes. The inspector snatched the documents from the timid detective and licked his fingers, then flipped through the pages. He raised his eyebrows.
国民番号 11298TM3099 無職家族構成は父母のみ3年同居の後に別居ブラスター個人戦別居ね鬼ババだったとかならともかく
Oni Baba.
優しくていいご夫婦だったそうじゃないか
Demon grandma. They look like a perfectly nice couple. This is interesting. How did you get to be so edgy, Akira? The distant memory of his foster parents surfaced in the back of his mind. They had indeed been kind. He considered himself lucky. Are they dead? But in the end, they were just strangers. They shared no ties of blood. Oh, come on, edgy boy. The detective leaned forward, nose almost touching the papers, and glared up at Akira.
外車の死因は全身打撲による外傷性ショック死アリバイなし現場から半径200メートル以内にいた
I was seen by whom?
スターの常連ときたら
Bitch, I was sleeping. Can I just say that Keisuke, my boyfriend, was with me? Something like that. The inspector slammed the papers down on the desk.
お前がに考えられたろうが
Excuse me, that sounds like a you problem. How did being a blaster fighter automatically make him the culprit? The most important thing here from this entire thing was just that someone saw us, apparently, like allegedly. He could understand them having a bad impression of him, but that didn't give them the right to label him a criminal.
嘘つけお前がやったそうだな
Excuse me? How? Okay, come on, bro. How many more times does he have to say, no, I didn't? Like, what? When Akira stared back silently, the detective sucked in a sharp breath and pointed at him.
瞬きをした今お前は瞬きをしたな
Excuse me?
黙っていても目は口ほどにものを言う
My eyes are talking and telling you that I'm still tired because you woke me up.
はい私がやりましたと
What? Akira was beginning to care less and less about where this was headed. If the state was this determined to pin the crime on him, there wasn't much he could do.
とにかく返すわけにはいかんおい連れてき
To where? The inspector spat the words with a reddened face. He slammed the steel desk again hard enough to leave a dent. Taking that as their cue, two policemen entered and took Akira's arms. They were the same officers who had arrested him earlier.
さて快適なお部屋へご案内だお前が住んでたボロい犬小屋より
Honestly, this entire facility kind of looks like my room, so I'll feel right at home. The thin-faced officer sneered, his voice slimy in Akira's ear. Ew. Spurred by revulsion, Akira spat on his cheek! No! Akira, no! We don't act on revulsion! Please! No! Bad Akira! This is not good for you. His entire face twitching with rage, the officer wiped his cheek with the back of his hand. Akira laughed scornfully.
だったらあんたが入ればいいだろ
Ah, that's the best comeback you had for that. Come on, man.
狂犬が
Woof. The second they yanked him out of the interrogation room, the well-built officer pulled Akira's arms together behind him. The other officer unhooked his club. Akira braced himself for what was coming. Oh,
ほらさっきの勢いはどうした
was it worth it, Akira? The dull thwack of his club echoed down the dimly lit corridor. Grimacing, Akira squeezed his eyes shut and endured it without making a sound. If he let so much as a single groan, he'd be giving them exactly what they wanted.
泣けよ泣きわめ
Dude,
け
I'm not playing into your kinks. Not a day hooker. Harder blows rained down on him as they hurled him back against the wall. He caught a glimpse of the thin-faced officer grinning, his eyes wide with sadistic joy. Who is the mad dog here exactly? This whole country was rotten beyond redemption. How was anyone supposed to believe in a brighter future? They were long past the point of no return. The beating continued But the more it hurt, the more determined Akira became to give these scumbags nothing. Well, makes sense. This looks exactly like your house. Except for the fridge. and the empty shelf. How much time had passed since they put him in his cell? They'd beaten him from head to toe. A dull ache filled every inch of his body. Okay, that's horrible. I'm sorry. I'm glossing over these, like, body horror things because, like, it's too horrible. I'm just kind of, like, focusing on what is actually fun about this game. Kind of like the room and the shitty combats of a 14-year-old. Without a doubt, this jail was the whitest building Akira had ever seen. Everything was white, from the walls and ceiling to the floors and bed sheets. I mean, doesn't that mean it's clean, though? Strangely, it made the place seem dim and eerie, even though the facility was lit by so many fluorescent lights. Oh, fuck those things! That he could barely open his eyes. Occasionally, he heard freakish moans or off-key humming in the distance. If anything, he felt more like a hospital psych ward than a place to house criminals. Yikes, can't you, like, break, like, 2 tubes of fluorescent lights, you know, that you have one single one in the corner? And in fact, that was precisely what it was. Several years ago, due to a rise in crimes related to mental illness, juvenile crimes foremost among them, the government decided that all criminal behavior was indicative of an underlying psychological pathology. Makes sense. Thus, prisons became institutions providing psychiatric treatment. Oh yeah, this kind of room is always great. The government went to great lengths to overturn existing perceptions of prisons, such as by implementing strict sanitation standards. Yeah! And using white interiors. I was very excited about that. And using white interiors to emphasize sterility, but what lay within was no less hellish than before. Oh, yikes. As ever, the government only cared about outward appearances. It felt so pristine here, it made him shudder. Akira's bed was soaked with a powerful scent of disinfectants, more than enough to give him a headache. Better than soaked with other smells. Honestly, I'll take the disinfectant stench over my cat using his litter box any day. Somewhere out there, he could hear a man with a deep voice calling for his mother. Oi. Perhaps the merciless whiteness of this room was making him hallucinate. Oi. As Akira gazed at his equally white walls, the man's voice called up in memory. You're not my real mom! Sorry, this is sad. Sorry, it's sad. It's sad. Okay. It's sad. It's sad, okay? Akira had been walking down a residential street when a child had burst from a nearby house, screaming at the top of his lungs. A woman, probably his mother, had shouted after the child, but he'd run off without sparing a glance. Akira had only caught a short glimpse, but that had been enough to see the bruises and scars covering the child's body. No! In the end, strangers were strangers. While it might have been different in another era, right now everything was hopelessly worn out. No one could afford to love someone who wasn't truly related to them. When you got down to it, the only person you could trust was yourself. The ponderous sound of a door sliding open cut through the din. Cut through the din? What? Akira pulled himself out of his reverie. He could see a guard swaggering down the hallway. Halting in front of Akira's cell, he briefly looked inside with a scowl, then undid the lock and slid the bars open. Clearly, he'd rather be anywhere else. I always confuse this red thing. I always confuse it for a heart. And I'm always like, oh my god, is this like... It's like reading Hunter x Hunter.
Nero, menkai da.
Is it my boyfriend? He couldn't think of anyone who'd come looking for him here. As he considered this, the guard impatiently jerked his chin towards the hall. Okay, theory time. I think it might either be boyfriend, or it might... well, he's not his boyfriend yet. Keisuke. It might either be Keisuke, or it's like someone from one of the many organizations that wanted to recruit Akira, who's her like jumping at the chance to represent him and get a favor out of him. Though it still didn't make any sense to him, Akira slowly forced his sore body to stand. The pure white room into which Akira was ushered resembled a bleached version of his cell. If they shut him up in a place like this, he was confident that he'd go crazy in a matter of hours. Yeah. The room was divided down the middle by a thin sheet of glass with chairs set up on either side. Thank you. The guard's forbidding voice echoed off the walls. Akira's mysterious visitors were already waiting on the opposite side of the glass. Ooh, oh, ooh. Hell yeah. Honestly, as a gay or bi woman, I didn't expect to find anything for me here, but here we are. A woman seated with a man standing at her side. He'd never seen either one before. At first glance, they almost didn't seem real. Everything about them was too neat, too tidy. It was like looking at a pair of life-size dolls. They're both kind of cute. As Akira took his seat, the woman's narrow lips widened in a smile. Her skin was as white as wax.
国民番号11298 TM3099 だな。
Alright. You just remember that? Akira had never gotten used to the lifeless numbers the government had assigned him. He stared at the woman in silence. If all people had like government numbers, you know, like social security numbers or whatever, why couldn't they like reunite them with their parents? Like, someone explain this plot hole. This is really annoying to me. Meeting his eyes steadily, she opened her mouth again.
単刀直入に言おう。我々がここに来たのは他でもない。
Girl!
お
How
前
many
の殺
times?
人罪についてだ。
I was sleeping!
俺じゃない。
Her smile
お
deepened.
前の容疑が晴れる可能性はほぼゼロに等しい。
Thanks. Yep, they're taking advantage of the situation for a favor. Who on earth were these two? Obviously, they weren't ordinary civilians, and considering the way they carried
自
themselves.
己紹介が遅れたな。私はエマ。彼はグエンだ。
Okay.
まあ、公にはできない立場のものとでも思ってもらえればいい。
Girl, you cannot be serious. Well, whatever that meant, it was clear that they weren't here on his behalf.
話を戻そう。今言った通り、お前の容疑が晴れる可能性はほとんどない。
Actually, I don't.
殺
Do I
人
get
罪を
killed?
犯した者の末路は。
Sorry, I never know. Whenever they first finished speaking. Her tone was suggestive, prodding. She was testing him. His annoyance building, Akira
終
replied.
身刑だろ。
Okay.
そう。当然、その恐ろしさも知っているな。
They go insane by being confined to white walls and fluorescent lights. Life sentence. Under the new laws of this country, all murderers, regardless of circumstance, received life in prison. But what that really meant was torture, state-sanctioned, that lasted until your death. Prisoners were prevented from killing themselves and were tormented in ways designed to ensure that they lasted as long as possible. What the what? At times, murderers who killed people in particularly heinous ways were forced to undergo the exact same treatment they themselves had inflicted. I know it's morally wrong, okay? Let me not defend this. It's just, you know, I'm only human, okay? Eye for an eye isn't always. No, I don't want to be on camera saying that. It's just it had crossed my mind sometimes to have wanted something like this to happen to someone that inflicted huge pain. But it was just an alleged thought. Anyway, it was all to bring the rising rate of violent crime under control, or so the government
この
claimed.
ままだと、お前は確実に終身刑となる。
俺じゃない。
Oh, Akira, come on, bro. Is he like actually 14? Akira glared at Emma, his words imbued with anger. More than he feared death or punishment, he was infuriated by this outrageous treatment. Oh my gosh. Emma lifted her chin, a gesture of
いくらこ
contempt.
こで無実を主張したところで、法廷で裁かれれば終わりだ。
Yeah. Figured. Well, you just now realized, Akira, come on, bro.
聞け。何もわざわざお前に最後通告をしに来たわけではない。
Yeah. Let's get down to business and at least crack open a book or two, Akira. Emma's eyes held a challenging
解
light.
放してやれなくもない。ただし、こちらが提示する条件を飲めばな。
Conditions are
条件。
国民番号11298 TM3099 ブラスター個人戦優勝者敗戦記録はなし腕は確かなようだな
Okay.
どいつもこいつもよっぽどブラスターが好きなんだな。
That was actually a good one. He was starting to get sick of hearing about it. Emma laughed a little at his response.
豊島という町のことは知っているね。
The sudden change in topic took Akira by surprise. Toshima. A district of the Old Lands, the abandoned capital metropolis where criminals gathered to flee the spreading tendrils of reconstruction. Wait, I thought we were already in the Old Lands. It's just all of Japan looking shit. Like, honestly, I thought we were already in the Old Lands because it looked horrible where we were. The city's existence caused no end of trouble for both the CFC and Nikorin, still don't know what that is, but neither side was willing to let the other solve the problem. A true solution was likely impossible as long as the country remained divided. Ah, so this kind of like... Ah, so this is the problem here. Okay. So then wouldn't the solution, if they still couldn't reunite, wouldn't the solution be like a Berlin kind, where you kind of like split the old district, old town into two, so that both of them could, you know, pursue their own problems? Wouldn't that be the solution? Sorry, I'm not smart.
知っているという顔だな。それならイグラの噂ぐらいは聞いたことがあるだろう。ブラスターに参加しているのならなおさらな。
Former champion?
イグラか。
He'd heard the rumors. Igra was an underground fighting tournament held in the lawless Toshima's district. There were more than a few blaster participants who longed to enter Igra.
同じストリートファイトとはいえ、イグラはブラスターのようなお遊びではない。命をかけた真剣勝負だ。勝ち残った者はイルレの座を手に入れ、名実ともにトシマの王として君臨する。
So it's a king's game?
イルレ？
トシマを拠点とする麻薬組織ビスキオの首領のことだ。連中はそう呼んでいる。
If you brute force yourself into being the king, you essentially just get handed an empire?
イグラとはイルレの座をかけた争奪戦のことだ。最も強い者こそがビスキオを率いるにふさわしいと、あの町に群れる狂犬どもは本気でそう思っている。
No, thank you.
ただの噂じゃなかったのか。
Street gangs were one thing, but the leader of an organization like Vishio would need brains. That's exactly what I was thinking. Oh gosh, I'm 14. Would need brains, not just brawn. It was as plain as the nose on Akira's face that choosing their leader by strength alone would eventually lead to their downfall. Yeah.
それが本当なら、ビスキオは正真正銘のバカの群れだな。
Yeah.
だが、ビスキオは我々 CFC や日光連も無視できない巨大なシンジケートとして勢力を誇っている。それがなぜか、わかるか？
I don't know, but maybe the fighting thing, you know, is kind of like a figurehead thing, like the queen. Like the queen didn't really manage her country. It was like a lot of people behind it and stuff, which is why, you know, the country was managed. And she was like a figurehead, right? So maybe the strongest fighter being king is also like a figurehead position in order to persuade the masses to follow the orders given to them. That would make sense.
頂点に立つ者が不動だからだ。イグラが始まってから今日に至るまで、現役のイルレを破って新たな王座を手に入れた者はいない。一人も？イグラの開催者である初代のイルレが、今も腐敗の王としてビスキオに君臨しているということだ。裏を返せば、奴は腐敗の自信があるからこそ、王座争奪戦などという推挙なゲームを始めたのだろうな。
The ultimate big dick douchebag move, you could say. Without realizing it, Akira's image of the man called Ire had become a presence in his mind too great to ignore. The tournament's founder and undefeated champion who willingly risked his life in position to lay low all the brave souls who faced him. No one would doubt the strength of a man like that.
現役のイルレは最強というカリスマ性によって組織を一つにまとめている。奴の腐敗伝説が崩れれば、組織も崩壊せざるを得ないだろう。それが。
And that's what you want. Emma paused to give Akira a nice glare. So you're telling me that you will get me out of prison just to ship me off to some lawless no man's land where I'm supposed to fight to the death and most likely, like to 98% likeliness, just, you know, fucking die in the gutters? That's what you're telling me? I mean, it's still a better deal than staying here and getting tortured for as long as possible. So yeah, sure. Yeah, not like I can confuse. Not like I can refuse or something. It's better than torture. Getting killed quickly, I guess. Akira had begun to connect the dots. Very good, Akira.
イルレを打ち負かしてしまうような挑戦者を探している。
その通りだ。例えばブラスターで連続優勝を飾るほどのストリートファイトの熟練者などは実に有望株だろうな。
Well, it was obvious by now that what condition he would need to meet in order to get his murder charge dropped. This icy-eyed woman wanted him to enter Igra to join the festival of slaughter and fight his way to the top.
あんたたち、国か警察かそっち側の人間だろ。いいのか。未来を担う若者を殺し合いに駆り立てて。
In response, Emma laughed scornfully.
無期懲役囚が担う未来などない。それに、お前の知る意味での警察とも我々は違う。我々は治安を維持するのではなく、治安の障害を排除する役目を負った人間だ。
Indeed, the detectives who'd questioned Akira had an entirely different aura than the two currently in front of him. These two, they looked like the sort who treated people's lives as if they were numbers on a balance sheet. Well, these two kind of like seem like people with a plan, you know, for like a grander picture kind of plan. And the police were just dumbasses.
これまでにも数回にわたってビスキオに侵入しイルレを暗殺する作戦が実行されたが、そのすべてが失敗に終わった。
Honestly.
イルレの守りは鉄壁だ。奴に近づくどころか正体をつかむことさえ叶わなかった。奴はイグラの決勝戦でしか姿を現さない。奴と接触し仕留める機会があるとすれば、そこしかない。
But I don't understand why you would want the Ilray to fall. Why would you want that? If it's a lawless place to begin with, isn't it better to have like at least some kind of organization going on around there? Or is it becoming a threat to everything around the lawless place, so that's why you want it to, you know, fall? But also, if you force it to fall, wouldn't it just kind of like, you know, rebuild itself differently? It's an ongoing problem, right? Is it really that big a deal to spend so many resources on a problem that will just rebuild itself as soon as it's, you know, quote unquote solved?
また随分必死だな。
Yeah.
豊島から CFC に流出している麻薬の量を知っているか？ビスキオは我々にとって目に余るほど大きな海だ。
Yeah, sure is. Probably the only thing. So they saw themselves as serving the greater good, all without getting their own hands dirty. Also, like I said, it's still redundant.
俺がイルレを倒したとして、もし新しいイルレが現れたら？
Yeah. Or like a different form of Ilray. Some of them will always come back. Eyes fixed on Emma's expressionless face, Akira questioned her with the challenge.
もしかしたら俺が2代目のイルレになって、また麻薬を流出させるかもしれない。豊島だけでなく、この町にも。
Emma was not impressed. She laughed harshly, eyes staring down at him as if he were a
お前が
worm.
富や権力のためにリーダーシップを発揮するというのか？面白い。お前についてのプロファイリングはすべて検証済みだ。群れでの
You're an asocial prick, Akira. We all know. Oh gosh. Sorry. Bullseye. He loathed the aggravation that came with leading a group. He had no interest in being a drug king, nor in working for the government. But what he wanted even less than that was to rot away behind bars without ever clearing his name. But then there was Igra, a fight to the death, not safe like Vasa. The victor would earn awe-inspiring renown, and the loser would pay for his weakness with his life.
選ぶ権利はお前にある。強制はしない。
And with that lovely and also very much useless sentiment, I'm going to end up this first episode here. I'm going to call this the 0 episode because it's, you know, it's from the quality, it's really awful. I know, I'm very, very, very sorry about the shoddy audio. You have no idea how much I struggled to get this to work even a little bit. So, yeah, I'm just glad I got this edited and done. So, believe me, the next episodes will be better. And with every episode I edit, the more I learn. So, hopefully it'll get better over time. And, yeah, I hope you're as excited as I am because this game is, wow, it's a wild ride, let me just tell you. But, yeah. Thank you for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great drink, have a great day, and yeah, take care of yourself. Bye-bye.